Hi, I'm Judy Green and welcome to NatChat. We're at Victorian Railways Antiques and my guest today is Richard Norton, who I know very well. He happens to be my husband. So welcome to the show, Richard.
Thank you, Judy. Nice to be here.
So Richard, when did you decide to leave the nest?
As in leaving Australia, that would have been 1979. Paul Dainty, an Australian entrepreneur, had brought Linda Ronstadt out to Australia for some touring. And Bob Jones and I were doing personal bodyguard work for Linda and the band. Through that tour, I formed a really close friendship with Linda. Ended up traveling to California at her request to work for her full time. And that was my first experience kind of working out of the country, which of course led on to full-time migration to the US.
And also, at that time, I believe you'd had Chuck Norris, you were involved, as you say, with the schools with Bob Jones, and then I think you needed sponsorship to actually live and work in America, so they both helped you with that, is that right?
Yeah, well, immigration's the same, it's kind of the same as it is here. You know, it's not that easy to get residence and to be able to work in a foreign country. Bob had brought Chuck Norris out to Australia a couple of years earlier, and again, through touring with Chuck, you know, we formed a very good friendship, and Chuck had said, if you ever want to come to California, make sure you look me up. When I went to work with Linda, I needed to get sponsorship in order to get a work visa, and Chuck was very helpful, different martial artists and everything that I knew, put in kind of, you know, resumes, bios and everything on myself and my abilities, and that helped me get a work visa, which led to an actual residence, you know, status in the US.
Because I know at that time you hadn't really thought much about a film career, you were focused on the bodyguard work. So, I mean, what does that mean? We hear bodyguards, like as far as onto with Linda and James Taylor and some of the other people. Could you share with the viewers what sort of experiences you had or what was expected of you?
Yeah, it's actually a really good question, because I think the stereotype of a bodyguard is some quite meaty, you know, beefy guy sort of standing around with his arms folded. What really worked you know, for them with me in capacity I was hired is that I could look like a member of the band. And of course Bob was the same. We tended to dress similar to how they dressed, because it's not, working as a bodyguard is not something abstract from them, and what I mean by that is everywhere I went, say with Linda, Stevie Nicks, David Bowie, whoever over in the States, I had an adjoining room to them everywhere they went. When I went to dinner, when I went to a party, whether I went to the concerts, I'm kind of glued alongside of them. So for me it was important that I didn't look divorced from that whole kind of setup. And you get to become, you know, more than a bodyguard for me in that role, it's almost like a glorified babysitter. And meaning that you get to be a real confidant. I mean, we used to say with tours that you had this little like space capsule, and there's certain musos that come in and the artists and people like myself and the tour manager kind of leaves the station. That's the beginning of the tour, and it's like this little time capsule. And if you're not on board that time capsule when it leaves, it's very hard to get on board. It's a very close-knit little community and everything in there. And again, so I'm in a position of confidence. I know everything that goes on with the artists and everybody else. And it's kind of that confidence was a very important sort of aspect of what I did, that, as I said, being around them so much, they needed to feel comfortable talking out loud, talking openly, at a restaurant or anything like that, or any even little personal problems they had. A lot of times, part of my job was just being an ear for these people to sort of talk about issues and everything. And again, it was important that they knew that would not go anywhere, you know, or any further than that discussion at that time.
And I also know through knowing you that they would have the trust in you, and I know recently when we went to see the concert with James Taylor that, you know, I could tell how much they loved you, and even saying what they had, you know, especially some of the guys, that you had such an influence on their lives, because, you know, back then there was probably a bit of drugs and things around, and then you used to work them out, and they really, from what I gather, you know, really respected you and looked up to you, and you always, you know, kept, you know, kept everything very...
Well, yeah, look, and that's what I mean. Apart from being some guy that stands with his arm folded, you know, what I brought to the tours was exercise. Now, back, I'm talking in the 70s, the idea of a band going out on the road and coming back off the road in better shape than when they left was unheard of, you know. So I would give them push-ups and sit-ups, banging the doors and get them up. Linda was into it. James, you know, that became his addiction, was exercise. And Rolling Stone magazine even ended up doing an article on me, you know, and talked to different members of the band and how interesting and different that was as an experience for them. So that's what I mean, you know, I think I was there to provide more than the security aspect, even though that would be the #1 aim. They needed to know that there was somebody with their head together straight that could do what they needed to do if that 1,000,001 chance ever came that there was a security breach. And, you know, and interestingly enough, even we can talk about that. I remember people used to ask me when I toured with James, well, why does James need a bodyguard? You know, we love him. To which I replied, well, why is John Lennon dead? You know, you're dealing with that 1 in a million sort of person that's no longer rational, has their own agenda, and that's what you're there for.
So tell me, when you decided to give up the bodyguard work, was that because you wanted to get into the movies, or you had opportunities open up, or, I mean, or what, or why did you give it away?
No, as you mentioned earlier, when I went to the States, I had no aspirations to get into movies. It really is one of those being in the right place at the right time. I went over, I've always considered I'm a martial artist #1, and I've always also said that everything great that's ever happened in my life has come out of my passion for the martial arts. So the bodyguard work was the start of it. Meeting Chuck Norris, of course, was the impetus to get me into movies.
So on that note, we're just going to go to a quick commercial break, and then I want to talk about your introduction into the movies and what that was like.
Okay.
So I hope you're enjoying our show today with Richard Norton, and we'll see you in a few minutes.